we saw Escape Room the other day.
We did.
And it's a new kind of horror thriller, kind of sci-fi, would you say?
Yeah, kinda.
Yeah, it doesn't really have any stars in it, but it doesn't really need it. It's the basic premise is it's kind of tapping into the kind of zeitgeist lately of everyone loves those escape rooms where you go, you have like an hour to try and find the way out. And if you don't find the way out, someone comes and tells you that you failed and you will go home a little bit less happy. Mm-hmm. In this case, however, in Escape Room, these 6 people have been handpicked by some mysterious games master who puts them into a deadly escape room where if they don't find the way out, it has slightly more fatal consequences than your average day out with your mates. Mm-hmm. And what did you think?
Surprisingly, I actually really enjoyed it.
Yeah.
I wasn't holding out much hope. It seemed like it'd been something that's been done a million times, but it was surprisingly very good.
Yeah, I mean, in a nutshell, I enjoyed it. I thought that it was a fairly unoriginal idea, but done in a pretty good way.
Yeah.
And until like 90% of the way through, I was thinking this is something I would happily buy on DVD and, get out on a, quiet evening and, put it on TV.
So did you not feel like that by the end of it?
It just kind of dampened my overall perception of the film a little bit. Like, it got to a point where I thought that, without sort of wanting to spoil too much, the film kind of played enough on certain conventions of the horror genre where it was actually quite enjoyable, and I thought, okay, this is actually not going to end entirely in the way that I expected it to. And then it kind of gets to a point where it should end, and then the director falls into that classic trap of just not knowing how to end his film, because I feel like the last 10 minutes belonged in the sequel.
I do agree with that. It got to a point where it was like it really should have finished.
Yeah.
And it just kind of went on a little bit too long.
Yeah.
I don't think it completely ruined it, and I still very much enjoyed it.
Yeah, I mean, don't get me wrong. I think the pacing of the film generally was really good, and the way that they kind of built suspense during the scenes, and I like how I like how films... We've watched versions of Escape Room before.
Yes, we have.
And it's very kind of linear. It's very kind of... It goes up in a very constant line. Whereas I like with this version of Escape Room, you had the first room where it just kind of set the tone of the film, with that sort of realisation of the characters kind of understanding what they've got themselves into. And then you have a slightly more kind of... a slightly briefer room, and then another long sort of scenario, and they kind of really kind of pace the sort of the acts of the escape room quite well, if that makes sense.
It does make sense.
And I'm really trying not to ruin anything here. But obviously, you know the genre. When you go into it, you know what's going to happen. You know not every character is going to make it out. But I do quite like how they went about playing out that series of events.
Yeah. It was surprisingly a good watch, and I would like to have it. It would be one that I still would like to get out on a quiet evening. Yeah,
I mean, I would watch it again, definitely. I don't know, like, it just, the last 10 minutes I just really was disappointed with. But the majority of the film I really enjoyed. I thought it was a good story.
Yeah, I did like what they did with it. I thought it was just going to be like every other film that we've seen about an escape room or people being trapped in a house and having to, do things. Like, I don't want to give anything away. I don't want to go too much into it. You know what it's about. Like, it's an escape room. But, I thought it was going to be very bog standard, and it wasn't.
I quite like how they started. So you've got this opening sequence, which you find out very soon is actually one of the main characters of the film in what appears to be in one of the escape rooms. And so I kind of like how they kind of set your expectations, and you know they're going to be subverted. They're not going to tell you the end of the film right at the start. So I like how they were kind of brave enough to play around with that.
Yeah.
And they knew that the story was going to be entertaining enough to keep your interest, even if they kind of gave some of the game away.
This is
at
the
the
thing.
Start.
Yeah, it was a very, very tense first 5 minutes, I think, and it did get everyone in the cinema's attention. Everyone kind of sat up afterwards and was like, "Oh my god!" And I thought that was really good.
And then you're kind of like, "Well, how did you get there?"
Yeah,
and how they kind of played that out, I thought was really good. And as a whole film, like the problem is, this is basically Saw for 2019.
yeah,
like because the issue is escape rooms. The whole concept of escape rooms were built on this idea that it was like bringing the idea of Saw to life. Like, because everyone was kind of fascinated with these sort of captivity horrors, like with Saw, where you're stuck somewhere and someone is like the evil genius sort of playing with you.
Yeah,
and that's basically how the idea of escape rooms were born.
Yeah,
and then you've got these films that are based on a concept which is based on Saw. So it's so easy, and other films in the last few years have done it, and it's felt like such a rip-off of the Saw franchise.
Absolutely.
At least this kind of feels like it's trying to do something a little bit different, because every horror film ticks the same boxes.
Absolutely, yeah. It's the same kind of like crib sheet, isn't it, to every horror? And I said that going into this film, I didn't want it just to be a rip-off of Saw, but it wasn't. It very much wasn't. It wasn't similar at all to it.
Yeah.
And we watched an absolutely terrible escape room film on Netflix, didn't we? That was so bad.
Yes.
And again, it was completely different from that as well.
Yeah, so I do think Sony have kind of got it right. They're clearly setting up a franchise which is going to be bigger than just the normal, like the first escape room.
Yeah.
So I do, it's not going to blow your mind. It's not going to change how you think about horror or how you think about films.
No.
But
it's a good watch.
Yeah, it's entertaining.
Yeah, and I would urge people to go and see it.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, buy, borrow, or bin? What would you do?
I would buy that.
I'm borrow.
No.
I'm sorry. It had me at buy throughout most of the film, and then I had to demote it at the end.
Well, you're not borrowing it from me. You don't deserve it.
Fine.